Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. I am your host, Joe Kuzma, and I am finally back. I know it's been a long time. I shouldn't have left you without a podcast to listen to, right? And a little bit out in left field there if you guys get a little inside joke with the music lyric there. But finally feel like I have a voice and some lungs and a stomach and a head and all these other pieces of my body back together. Let me tell you, it was a grueling week of just being down with a sickness or illness of some sort, and then, of course, dragging my nearly dead zombie-like carcass around, celebrating my daughter's birthday. For those of you who wished her a happy birthday, thank you very much for the well wishes for me and her. I really do appreciate it, but lots and lots of Steelers news, including a very promising-looking preseason game against the New Orleans Saints. But even with my voice back, I'm not here doing this one alone. I have a little bit of help with my co-pilot. As I said before, if I'm one, he is 1A. I'd like to welcome back Mr. Steelers Grind himself, Eric Herrmann, to the show. Eric, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Joe. How are you?
You know what? I tell everyone that I could complain, but no one would care. So I've done enough complaining through finally being sick, and like I said, I have my wits about me. My head's clear. I can think about all these things that are going on. You know, I was just telling you off the air, we have this format. I think I'm just going to rapid fire everything but the meat of the topic. The meat of the discussion was going to be fantasy football with Pittsburgh Steelers, but all the things that are going on around us so far, I'm going to rapid fire. I'm just going to say all the topics, and then we're going to cover them. So we've had roster cuts. We've had restructured contracts. We have injuries. We have free agents that the Steelers are interested in, or guys that have been released from other teams. So, you know what? You have a roster prediction that's going to be coming out, and we're just holding on to this sucker, just waiting for the Steelers to make the remaining roster cuts they have by whatever time. Is it 4 o'clock on Tuesday to get these done? And they only have like 4 other people that they need to really cut. Actually, one of our guys that we're pulling for, Raven Paul, is still there. I think he may make this cut just based on, I think we have some like defensive linemen and offensive linemen that we really don't need, and maybe a wide actually the wide receivers are already gone, Blakeney and Norwood. So I don't know. I'm trying to think where else they're going to trim from. You have any guesses, Eric, or are we just going to have to wait? Because then the roster prediction's kind of dumb if we were to release it. Let's say we released it a day early before they make the final cuts, and then there's a few guys on there. I don't think there's going to be any guys on the final 53 prediction that would maybe get cut, but you just never know.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think some of our defensive linemen are pretty set. We have, Hargrave, McCullers, LT Walton's going to make it. Then, of course, Cam and Stephon Tuitt. I don't really expect any surprises, so I think a guy named like Hooks and Sigler, those guys, they're not going to make the roster. Maybe the practice squad. So defensive linemen, I wouldn't be surprised. And some of the guys are even cut. I don't think I've even heard their names before. So there's probably going to be guys I've never even heard before that got cut.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of sad that, you know, you say some of that stuff, but it was so obvious. When I had Mark Ullman, a.k.a. Steel Dad, on the show like a couple of weeks ago, we were just talking about, and I've already forgot the guy's name. I think it was the long snapper, and I said, yeah, he's kind of, it's an uphill battle.
I can't.
Dooley. It was Dooley.
Yeah, I knew it was like an Uli of some sort.
Dooley, and then they have like a Whalen or something like that. In fact, he may have already been released, so I have to go through the list again. But quite frankly, the only name really of consequence with any of the position battles, Will Monday, the other punter in camp, released. So it's Jordan Berry's job now for sure.
Mhm.
I think just to save Jordan Berry's leg a little bit, maybe push him, maybe just see. You never know. I mean, Jordan Berry, I thought, had a pretty solid year last year. I've been loving the punters and the special teamers lately. In fact, the last time me and you got together, we were doing special teams. So, but I've been talking about Berry so much, and I'm just I'm excited for him. I'm glad he came back and he didn't have a sophomore slump. So that's about the only real name that jumps off the page there as far as guys that have anything to do with the position battle. Of course, Dustin Vaughn, he was injury, whatever the exact designation was for that. I have to be careful what I say. It's not my normal PTI guy, Ben Anderson, but I had somebody else saying, and I'm going to bring this up, actually. It's a little bit of a retraction, even though it's more or less the way I said it was misleading versus what it actually is. So the Steelers still haven't done anything with Senquez Golson. That's going to go into our next little piece here with Keenan Lewis being released from the New Orleans Saints. And I did a whole show on it last week, and I was talking about, that if the positives, glass half empty, glass half full, everybody thought he left, he didn't have a contract. Now we're finding out, and you sent me the message actually, we're finding out that there might still be interest there. It's just going to maybe take 4 to 6 weeks if he's healthy. Well, we still don't know what's going on with Senquez Golson. We get some news that says, well, you know what, it could be mid-October, and somebody else says it's going to be in November. And I think that's where they really stand, is they're trying to evaluate what's going to go on with him. And I think that really has some bearing on what happens with Keenan Lewis and some of these other moves there. So my retraction, I'll let you speak here in a second, Eric, because I got off track. The retraction was I had said if Senquez Golson or Bruce Gradkowski get placed on injured reserve, one of them could be designated to return. And somebody said, well, they changed that this year. They changed it. Yes, I'm aware. It's the Buffalo Bills rule. It's the way I said it. Now, previously, prior to this year, you had to specifically designate that player as the one to return when they are placed on the injured reserve list. You no longer have to do that, but you only have one of that, quote, designation. You only have that one get-out-of-jail-free card that you could use to bring somebody back off the IR early or whatever as that designation to return. So it's still the designation to return. They call it the Buffalo Bills rule. It's a little confusing on how to exactly say it, but just so you guys know, if they go and throw 3 people on injured reserve, they don't have to specify that Senquez Golson would be the one that gets to return as that designated player. They could designate anybody off that list when they're ready to come off that list. It's at the time they come off, not at the time they're placed on it. Whew, I'm out of breath. Finally got that out. So what do you think? Keenan Lewis, does Golson does this play into the whole thing? Do you think Lewis is still an option? You think they'd give it a go? They see what happens in a month. They play a few games. What do you think, Eric?
I mean, nothing's impossible. It may not be probable, but I wouldn't count it out. But if I'm placing a bet, I say we're not going to sign Keenan Lewis. If it's not going to be for 6 or 7 weeks, a big part is just chemistry. I know Cockrell came in late and just was thrown in, but he was able to get time with the starters and everything. But Keenan Lewis coming in almost mid-season and thrown into the fire, it seems kind of last minute because by that time your starters should be pretty established and they should be used to playing with each other. So considering our secondary already is pretty full of question marks and pretty rough, I'd rather not throw a giant wild card in there. And even if Senquez Golson does return around then, that would almost make having Keenan Lewis useless because prior to Golson's injury, our cornerbacks were pretty locked, having Duran Grant as the number 5 guy who's kind of a question mark. So if Golson can return around mid-October, early November, like he's saying, that would make Keenan Lewis useless. But even if he does come a little later, I'd still say no, just because we want chemistry with the cornerbacks, and just a last-minute addition just probably would not be that helpful.
Yeah, I mean, you have a guy that has some experience but would be banged up versus the guy who's younger with some upside that's been banged up with no experience. So I guess either way, you're darned if you do, darned if you don't. with the exception of you're going to throw whatever extra money you have to spend at Keenan Lewis and bring him onto the roster and whatnot. But the Steelers, they've been freeing up some money, restructuring some contracts. Who did we have? It was Mike Mitchell, and I want to say, was it Marcus Gilbert was the other one that was the restructure? So they're freeing up some money. Made the mistake of getting into a conversation with Jim Wexell and somebody else, and I was kind of assuming just off the top of my head. I said, this is the money for Timmons, and they said, well, you wouldn't need extra money for Timmons, especially if they don't want to pay Timmons what they were already paying Timmons. And it's like, well, yeah, that makes sense with their current cap situation and the way the contracts are, but I was already assuming that maybe some of these other deals, like a Le'Veon Bell or a David DeCastro or something like that, it's getting done, and then they can't afford Lawrence Timmons. I don't know. I don't know what they're freeing the money up for. I mean, we know there's a few spots that they might that they need some help with, and we've talked about tight ends. We just talked about the cornerbacks. Well, we've talked about tight ends on the side, really, with Green sitting there on the PUP list. And part of your 53-man prediction, if he continues to not be available, he and Le'Veon Bell both would actually technically not be part of that 53 or so, the way they have to adjust it, and then somebody has to get released and they get brought back on. So we're wondering if Xavier Grimble ends up sticking there, and if Jesse James, those are the two guys they have, really, is they're using David Johnson an awful lot as a tight end too. So I'm wondering if they're restructuring some money either for somebody in the secondary. I really doubt there's anybody we could target as a quarterback. Some of the guys that you had in your article, so maybe that might be roster bubble guys on other rosters, I think would still be affordable, and there's a few moves like that they can make. What do you make of all this? Do you have any educated guess more than me? I have one, but it goes against the grain with what this team usually does, and he still has 2 years left on his contract. They only do it if it's a quarterback, and they've done it for everybody. They've even done it for Tommy Maddox and Cordell Stewart. Don't think they're going to do it for Antonio Brown, but never know. What do you think?
I mean, it could be a quarterback. I mean, I guess that would kind of make sense since quarterbacks are usually kind of overvalued. But, I mean, if we got a guy like Austin Davis or who else, Geno Smith or Bryce Petty, they probably wouldn't go for that much. But considering they are quarterbacks, we might have to pay a little more than we'd like. But other than that, I really can't think of why. It may just be a contingency because I know last year we had a lot of guys go down. We had to pay a lot of money in injury settlements. So it could just be preparing for that, or if guys get hurt and we do have to bring in street free agents. So I'd probably say the money's more contingency than street free agents, but it could go to a quarterback. That's probably the most likely position that we'd spend the money on. Because even if I think I saw that if we paid DeCastro, I think his cap number would go down. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if we do sign the long-term deal, his cap number will go down, so I wouldn't worry about that. And with Timmons, he may make a little bit more money, but my guess if he did sign a deal with more, I think how I did with Polamalu and Heath, they kind of more extended their contracts to multiple years instead of giving them a lot more new money. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, but I don't know. It's really weird, and it's kind of hard to understand why they're making this new money. So
yeah,
your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, and they're supposed to have an insane amount of cap money next year. Of course, some of the guys coming off the books like that, like a Lawrence Timmons, one of the higher, he's like one of the top 5 paid Steelers. I think he's the highest paid on the defensive side of the ball currently. And, of course, Big Ben being the highest paid Steeler altogether. But, yeah, David DeCastro, his 5th-year option, pays him a pretty decent sum already, and that was part of it too. But that wasn't exactly what I was saying with the cap deal when I was having this little back and forth. The other guy's name, I think, was Ian Whetstone, I think was his name, and Jim Wexell, and we were going back and forth and talking about this, and I wasn't necessarily saying you're going to pay all this money to a guard. That was a little misunderstood in 140 characters as well. I kind of thought maybe it was another one of these deals where maybe you're not like kicking the can down the road, which you could do with somebody like Lawrence Timmons like you did with Heath or Troy. But when they had done this similar deal with Marquise Pouncey, they front-loaded the current year, which would be the 2016 year equivalent right now, with all of the extra cash that they had available, so he was more of a bargain later on. The Steelers do contracts completely different from anyone else. They're kind of like the prototype or the model around the league. So that was pretty interesting. The other thing that was interesting, of course, when talking about the street free agents and players being released is, me and you talk every day, whether it's text, phone, email, Facebook, Twitter. I mean, we're communicating constantly, and this Carlos Williams news that he gets released. And Carlos Williams was another one of these, and we're going to talk about fantasy here shortly. He's a guy, when I was talking about Ladarius Green recently and saying how Ladarius Green had won me some money in the daily fantasy, like the DraftKings and FanDuel type thing, Carlos Williams was a darling there for a few weeks where LaShawn McCoy wasn't able to get out there and play. And then I think Carlos Williams himself had like a concussion and missed like 2 or 3 weeks himself and kind of just lost that steam later as the season progressed. But he's released by the Bills, suspended the first 4 games of this season for violating the substance abuse policy, which I assume is marijuana, because that seems to be, I think, 90% of it, because otherwise they say performance-enhancing drugs. They usually come right out and say that, like I think Dwight Freeney was a PED type thing. And so Carlos Williams, when I saw that, and he was a 5th-round draft choice last year, he's a second-year player, reportedly shows up to camp overweight. I guess he has a case of the munchies, whether he's smoking weed and he's eating too much or it was his pregnant wife is what was being reported. I think he would be a solid addition to this team if he could get his head on straight. Of course, you've got some of the reasons why you wrote the article about it. Why don't we just give that a short discussion? Because you know what? It seems like we're pretty much, if anybody becomes a free agent now, I think we should just do an article and or podcast about them, because it seems like all we've been doing for the last couple of weeks is just, hey, here's a new player. It's Keenan Lewis. It's Will Allen. I brought up Michael Vick just when Bruce Gradkowski got hurt. Some of it's hypothetical, and then it's like, well, you know what? That would be too hypothetical that Carlos Williams ends up like on waivers, and then he clears waivers, and now he's a unrestricted free agent, and I'm just like, nah, Pittsburgh would want nothing to do with him. Then we find out over the weekend he was visiting. He just concluded his visit in Pittsburgh. So have at it.
Oh, man. See, I opened the article with, it's been an odd time in Pittsburgh, because it's true. I mean, I know a lot of people were saying, oh, they're never going to do Keenan Lewis. He's hurt. He's old. And they brought him in for a visit. And people are saying the same thing about Carlos. And allegedly they brought him in for a visit, because that's the usual thing on Twitter. You see people, this overrated player gets cut. Oh, the Steelers bring him in. Oh, this stupid player gets cut. Oh, the Steelers going to bring him in. So it's pretty shocking when it's actually repeated. They actually do bring the players in. So that's why it's just bizarre. But see, I'm like you. I didn't really think he had a chance just due to all his character concerns. But the fact that Steelers are bringing him in does make me think there is a chance, because he does have a lot of talent. We saw it last year. He's a very capable back. And a lot of the reason he did fall in the draft is because he did have some character concerns, which are legitimate. But we've seen players like rebound from those, like Tyrann Mathieu. And I'm sure there's many other players I just can't think of. But like I mentioned in the article, we've also seen the Steelers get burned a lot, like Martavis Bryant and Le'Veon Bell most recently, Santonio Holmes, Chris Rainey. So
yeah, exactly. Chris Rainey, comes to mind only because he too was a 5th-round pick. So they've been burned. God, it's such a bad word to use when you're talking about like smoking, dope or whatever. Even dope. Dope is such like an old school word. It's like something my uncle uses. He's much more my senior. And he's always saying these guys are smoking dope. But I think the benefit though, or what would work in Carlos Williams' favor as opposed to any of the other, well, I'll say 30 teams, since we know the Bills Bills are no longer interested in him, is that his older brother plays for the Steelers and just was awarded that additional 3-year contract here last week. So apparently former 6th-round pick Vince Williams, inside linebacker, who may be on an inside track for a lot of playing time, he must have some pull. He's going to be sticking around with this team for a while, and he got his brother a visit, at least a look. So, I mean, that's pretty significant. Now, where Carlos Williams comes into play here, and I think what we had was, 7 rushing touchdowns and 2 receiving. He had nearly 100 yards receiving and about 500 and change rushing, and he only started like a handful of games. So he was quite impactful, and that's with Tyrod Taylor as the quarterback. Sammy Watkins was hurt for a good portion of that year. I mean, they didn't have like a whole lot there in Buffalo that was working for them. I mean, the best thing that worked for them was they beat the Jets, and that happened to work for us as well. So Carlos Williams, now we got to look into the future. You have Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell slated to be a free agent. Could be somebody they're freeing up some of this money for. Could be somebody they just wait. They could easily tag him next year. They do not have to jump on this. They could wait. But Le'Veon Bell, if he has part of his compromise in this whole strange scenario of things that have been going on with his situation, if he gets in trouble again, he got his games reduced, which is bizarre in itself. It means the NFL has basically admitted something wrong but not admitting all fault. And I guess the compromise is that if something happens again, he's only going to serve a 4-game suspension instead of a 10-game suspension. Whereas Carlos Williams, if he's caught red-handed next time, he's going for the 10 games, and he could go even longer if it's multiple misses, kind of like what happened with Martavis Bryant earlier this year. But I don't know. There's some teams that aren't really going to touch this guy, but a 5th-year contract, not a whole lot of money. Or I'm sorry, not a 5th-year contract, a 5th-round draft pick. That type of contract is not a really big deal to take on, because you just don't know how far or how deep down the roster you're going to have to go. We had Jordan Todman and Fitzgerald Toussaint. Todman coming off of waivers from the Carolina Panthers after the end of the preseason last year. Fitzgerald Toussaint joining the team mid-season, formerly from the Baltimore Ravens, and also, I believe Fitz was also undrafted. Those are the guys you're picking up off the bench, or you could have this guy who stepped in for LaShawn McCoy and did a pretty darn good job, scored 9 touchdowns last year, and is also a receiving threat. Might be worth rolling the dice.
Yeah, I think another big thing is just the situation he's being put in Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh's a very blue-collar town. We're very stern and confident. We expect a lot from our guys, and I'm not trying to slander Buffalo at all, but I think a big factor is the fact that we have Ben Roethlisberger and D'Angelo Williams. Because Ben's a longtime vet. He's been known to take guys under his wing, and same with D'Angelo. He's been in this league for a long time. He's always been classy. For example, he kind of got screwed by the Panthers, but he handled it with class. He handled it great. Now he's here and he loves Pittsburgh. And I know LaShawn McCoy, he got some trouble over the offseason. And Tyrod Taylor he's a great quarterback, but he's still kind of young, so he may not have the confidence and leadership like a guy like Ben. So I think being put in a position where he can be taken under the wing of these more experienced and wise players, I think that could be really beneficial, in addition to having his big brother, Vince Williams, on the team.
And the coaching staff and support staff that's just there. I mean, I can't speak for Buffalo. And I mean, Rex Ryan's been around, but you look, Rex Ryan was fairly new to that situation. He's just entering his 2nd year as a Buffalo Bills head coach. That, once again, you can't even fault the head coach for what guys do on their own time. I made this same argument with Mike Tomlin, because a lot of people wanted to blame him for Le'Veon Bell. Another thing here is people are thinking into Le'Veon Bell too much to say, hey, we already got 2 guys that smoke marijuana. Le'Veon Bell actually has not failed a drug test, to my knowledge. Isn't that correct? I mean, he got caught with the DUI thing, and that's what got him in trouble. Was they were caught with the marijuana and whatnot, but he actually, I don't think he's peed dirty or whatever, that to my knowledge, and at least he missed tests is what happened.
On that video he posted on Instagram, I think he said he hadn't smoked weed since December 2014.
Yeah, that's not good.
The encouragement there is kind of mixed, because, yeah, it's been a while, but that was during the season, but I'm looking at the glass half full and that he's clean right now. So that's what I'm focused on.
Yeah, and 2014, that was after the whole thing happened. That was back when either right before he got hurt, I want to say before the playoff game with the Ravens at home when they won the AFC North. Because this whole thing was a very long process. This originally happened in the preseason. It wasn't in 2015. It was in 2014 preseason with LeGarrette Blount and some other unidentified person that remains anonymous in this whole deal. And it's just funny. It took a whole year for him to serve that suspension. You got all these asterisks and all these bylines to all his suspensions because that one they changed the whole policy. I don't know how we got into talking the whole drugs thing. Oh, yeah, Carlos Williams. So we're trying to figure out if it's the same thing. But somebody's saying we want to add another pothead to the team. We don't know that Lev Bell is a pothead, but that video, much like the James Harrison thing, the accusations that came from Al Jazeera, that video could get Lev Bell in trouble because the NFL could investigate on it. They have a very loose – basically, if you accuse somebody, player A accuses player B of something, the NFL has the right to investigate player B whether or not they could substantiate what happened with player A, which was James Harrison's whole argument. He said, if somebody accuses me of child molestation. I don't know that was the exact thing he said, but it was something along those. Yeah, it was something along those lines. And you're saying you're going to investigate me on that, and that's the way it almost works anymore in society. Is all the knee-jerk reactions, and you're guilty until proven innocent instead of the other way around. That's kind of how the NFL rules work. So very, very, very interesting situation there. Carlos Williams, though, could be a bargain, and, we don't need him we're going to be without a running back for 3 games, but we don't necessarily need Carlos Williams for those first 4 games. He could prove himself to get in shape, prove himself, earn his spot, basically. And he could be something valuable looking forward because D'Angelo Williams, he's, 32, 33 years of age right now. He's up there. He's in his final year of his contract. You never know. He could play a 1-year deal next year. He could retire. The Steelers could decide to move on. If you have somebody like Carlos Williams waiting in the wings, I think that's a nice, viable backup should he stay out of trouble. And, I mean, if he does get in trouble, he could get in trouble before then. So they could cut ties with him rather easily. There's very little risk, I think, on the Steelers' end of things. They could have the guy locked up for a few years as far as the way all these contracts and whatnot are structured. So I don't know. I say roll the dice on it. Probably an inexpensive, high ceiling risk there. So
I agree.
The other one that's coming around too is how does Cam Hayward think he's going to heal like Wolverine? I mean, he says he has mutant powers. That might get these same NFL people going right after him. So he had some type of like mild or low grade high ankle sprain, I believe, and says he's ready for week 1. And then Marcus Gilbert with his elbow. I don't know. Both these guys say they're acting like they're warriors. They're saying they're going to play. I don't have any concerns. You have any concerns that these guys won't be on the field week 1?
Oh, no. I know Marcus Gilbert. I think he's commented once or twice, but Cam Hayward, he's been just relentless on Twitter, posting pictures of Goku and like a conversation with his grandpa, and like he's so confident and excited. Like he's going to be there week 1. I have no doubt.
I swear I saw a picture of him like getting rehabbed with like smoke and stuff, and I went to look for it again and I couldn't find it. Like one of those like ice chambers or like something like that. Like, and it looked like something maybe out of Wolverine. I tried to look for it again. I couldn't find it. It was on Twitter somewhere. I mean, the guy, if you don't follow Cam Hayward, you are truly missing out. There's some great entertainment there. He's nicknamed Javon Hargrave. He's nicknamed him J Wobble now, and he put his nameplate of J Wobble above Hargrave's locker the other day, and then he was talking about J Wobble's first sack in the NFL. You know, we really didn't talk about it much, but the preseason game against the Saints, I mean, we went all from a Yinzing for 2 games straight to everybody. All is right in Whoville now. or Mudville. It was Mudville where Casey was at the bat. Everything has been Whoville was the Grinch that stole Christmas. That was the problem. The first 2 weeks, everyone was the Grinch. Now everyone is happy. The crowd goes wild. The world goes crazy when they see all of the starters finally out there. Just like I said, and when you get the starting offensive line with even Landry Jones back there, what a difference does it make when he's actually playing with some halfway decent football players instead of like, you just threw the goon squad together or whatever out there, and you're mixing and matching like, well, you know what, we got you're gonna have to wear a size large jersey because it's all we have left. And that's the way I think about the preseason a lot of times. We talked about the injuries, but anything in the game that stood out to you? I mean, I think, well, to me, Antonio Brown, and it's just because he was kind enough to retweet the video, the Vine earlier, log into my Twitter, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, okay, how did that get okay? Yeah, I see what happened here. Thanks, AB. Business is booming. But obviously, that's my favorite pick. That's my favorite play. Anything stand out to you? Any different with that game? I mean, everybody looked like a superstar against the Saints.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think one big thing is Eli Rogers. Just the fact that he started in the slot. I think that could have some really big implications for the season, because if he's our starting slot receiver, then I don't know what that means for Coates, because as far as I'm concerned, DHB is ahead of Coates in the depth chart. So if Eli Rogers is ahead of Coates as well, I don't know what Coates would do this season.
Yeah, I don't know. He could. It looks like there's like a 3-way competition, and even worse, DeMarcus Ayers. I've seen nothing. That guy's
he's not making it. Maybe he'll make practice squad, hopefully, but I mean, who knows?
Just an afterthought. I mean, Eli Rogers is just really pulled away with the whole thing. I remember Keenan Severin was a guy we were talking about early in training camp. Shaq Phillips was a guy I was high on. I mean, all forgotten names now. Eli Rogers kind of stands alone there. Kobe Hamilton still hanging in there, but
he could be a practice squad guy.
Could be.
Could.
So, yeah, Eli Rogers, I love that he's been playing with the first team. Then he gets out there with Ben. Apparently, Ben loves him. We've heard Mike Tomlin say, Mike Tomlin's never not, I'm going to use double negative here. He's not ever going to not sing the praises of his own players. I'm not sure how really to say that in any other different way, but he's not going to, like, just, I don't know, crap all over somebody and say, oh, no, you know what, they suck. I don't think I've ever heard a coach say that in a press conference. I don't think they'd be a head coach for very long. So, I mean, Eli Rogers being out there with the ones was very cool to see. Looked like there was a miscommunication on a play, much like a similar play with DHB and Landry Jones in the first week of the preseason. And Ben kind of gave that look, and then they went right back to him. He got the third down conversion there. And then on that first opening drive, I mean, Jesse James was like a force. Catches 3 passes, and I think there was the other one. There was a hold that they actually called back, so he actually had like a fourth play that was negated that was a big play, making everybody forget about Heath. What do we yell in the stadium when Heath's no longer there? Is it Jesse, James, Outlaw?
Yay.
I think it's got to be James, and he made this game right there. Now, granted, it is the Saints. The Saints are one of only two teams, sadly, that had a worse pass defense in the NFL last season than the Pittsburgh Steelers. So they're also repairing a really bad defense there. So I'm just hoping everything's going to look great maybe against the Saints. I don't know. I'm hoping it's a little less of that, and the Steelers are just that good and that much of a polished machine, which obviously they looked back on Friday night.
Hey, at least I got the confidence build up. You can at least take that away.
Yeah, and my dark horse, Tyler Matakevich, hanging in there, getting a pick. I mean, the guy, I do like the play-by-play guys from New Orleans. Now, they screwed up Jesse James's name, and they were calling Jesse James Jesse Rogers, and I believe they called Eli Rogers James. They had him mixed. They had him completely flipped to start the game. But those guys on the Matakevich pick, I think I'm trying to think who the QB was for the Saints. I don't think it was it Graham at that point, or it may have been someone else. And they said, well, he threw it to the only guy that was open. Unfortunately, it was one of the Steelers linebackers. So, but man, Dirty Red, he is everywhere on the field. I get that bad feeling of like, I really liked Howard Jones, and Howard Jones was kind of a darling. I don't know. I think Tyler's a lot better. I think he's showing a lot more than what Hojo was showing when he was here, and I sincerely hope that he does make this final roster. I hope he's just not a practice squad guy, because I have a feeling I think people have been looking, and they're going to pluck him from the roster.
See, I see it almost like Roosevelt Knicks last year. Like, if these guys just keep making splash plays, like, you almost have to keep them, because they're getting on the field and they're producing. They're not just getting on the field and just meandering around, just going through the motions. Like, he's making plays, he's having an impact. So I feel like we have to keep him. Speaking
of which, and this is kind of the sidebar, I didn't have this in my notes, but you jogged my memory. We were talking earlier, and someone had tweeted in earlier, I think Friday, Saturday, somewhere on the weekend, talking about how the Steelers have had scouts at 2 Jacksonville Jaguars games so far this preseason. And we looked up and down the roster, and we were trying to figure out who are they scouting. And I think you had the name. And I know the name, but this is all yours, buddy, because you're the one who found it, because they visited him. Was it last year, 2015? They gave him a visit.
Yeah, 2015. It was Nick Marshall. And the only reason I know that, I vaguely remember, but I was searching to see if they visited Carlos Williams when I stumbled upon his name. So, I mean, it's possible. He was a quarterback in college, converted to a cornerback. I don't remember if he may have been drafted in the 7th round. He may have been undrafted free agent. I don't know how good he is, but they showed some interest, so it's safe to assume he's at least on their radar a little bit.
Yeah, and we're talking about roster bubble guys, because when I was looking at their tight end depth chart, it didn't really look like anyone was moving there. Julius Thomas is there, but Mercedes Lewis has been there for ages. I don't think that he's expendable by any means, but you never know. We had to go offline for a technical difficulty for one moment, and now that we're back, we figured out the one guy you couldn't remember the name from formerly a Steeler, Mr. Hit and Run, Alameda Tamu, and now he is with, and that's one of those picks that didn't work out either, where it was a nose tackle, and they thought they may have had a guy that was in the pipeline to replace maybe like Casey Hampton or somebody like that as one of the older players. But once again, another one of these guys, I got one to mention. You've been watching the whole Cardinals deal. Well, there's another Cardinal for you, former Steeler. Mm-hmm. But I saw one just maybe it was on NFL Network. And it was Bruce Arians talking with, it's one of his assistant coaches. I don't know necessarily a quarterback's coach, but a former quarterback from the Pittsburgh Steelers, Byron Leftwich, first-year coach with the Arizona Cardinals now. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember if I did that whole Steelers West kind of joke. And speaking, I don't remember if it was you that was a guest or somebody else, but we're just talking about how many people end up from the Steelers organization over with the Arizona Cardinals. So you have Ta'amu, who was there. I'm not sure if he's still there. And then now Byron Leftwich is yet another name added onto that long list of names. And let me tell you, I had really, I can't tell you the displeasure of seeing Big Ben in the top 100 below Carson Palmer. I was so happy to watch the preseason game and watch Carson Palmer throw a pick six to John Simon of the Houston Texans. Man, let me tell you, I'm fairly upset that the Steelers missed on Simon. That was somebody that would have been attainable too, and he has just turned into a stud for that team. And it was really cool because, again, I was telling you the high school connection locally here with Simon, and then, of course, the Steelers, that Ray Vinipal still maybe hanging on. But that is going to wrap most of – it was supposed to be a lightning round. It turned into a thunderstorm. So we're going to come at you with part 2 here of the fantasy football portion in our next edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. So, Eric, I'd like to thank you once again for joining me today.
Oh, of course, anytime.
And ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Very interesting thoughts, so much stuff going on. You could check out all of the different details and articles from the entire Steel City Underground team over at steelcityunderground.com. Also, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter. Remember, Antonio Brown even retweeting us because business is booming, baby. The best month ever. Once again, really appreciate each and every one of you who follow us, like us, share us, retweet us, leave a rating, listen to the show, whatever it may be, wherever you're commenting. You are all part of the underground, and you are the people who help make this happen. Thank you very much, but until next time, be safe, be good, and I will catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.